You lie against the trunk of a tree, surrounded by the dead, beaten, battered, and bloody. The battle was fierce, and just when you thought you'd survived it, a stray arrow caught you in the side, embedding itself through your armour and flesh. Now, the wound on your hip is pouring with blood, but you're too weak to get up and seek help. You know in the next few minutes, you'll be dead too. That is, until you hear the soft hoofbeats of a steed. You assume it's some dead knight's warhorse, aimlessly wandering the battlefield in search of its master, until you lay eyes on it. Its fur is as white as snow, its mane a rainbow of colours, and above all, it has a long, spiked horn protruding from its forehead. This is no mere horse. It is a saviour, here to pull you back from the brink of death. Hello, I'm Conan of Coco's Homebrew, and welcome back to From Mythos to Monsters, the show where I analyse the historic roots of your favourite fantasy monsters. This is the first episode I'm recording after officially launching the podcast. I want to quickly say a huge thanks to those of you who have supported me so far by watching and subscribing on YouTube or Spotify. Also, before we begin, I'd like to announce some changes over on my Patreon. Paid patrons will now be able to vote on upcoming topics for the podcast, and I may also release some exclusive bonuses or specials, so let me know if you have any ideas for these. Now, today I'm feeling very patriotic as we're going to be talking about Scotland's national animal, the unicorn. Now, when you think of the unicorn, you probably think about medieval Western Europe, where people developed a huge obsession with the creature. However, we're actually starting today's journey way more to the east, since the unicorn is first mentioned in the ancient myths of India, China, and Mesopotamia. The legend of the unicorn first began to crawl west in around 400 BC, when the Greeks wrote about an Indian animal which resembled a strange horse or goat, made distinctive by the single horn protruding from its head. However, the Greeks weren't writing about the unicorn in a mythological sense. They were including it in actual natural histories, as in their minds, this was a real animal. The Greeks also claimed that this creature's horn, which was made of a material that later became known as alicorn, was capable of curing stomach problems, epilepsy, and even poison, if you drank from the horn like a cup, laying the foundation for the unicorn's association with healing, which it has retained to this day. The Bible mentions a similar creature, a strong and splendid horned animal that was originally called a riem, which was translated in the King James Version of the Bible as unicorn. Yet the word riem in Hebrew actually refers to a breed of now extinct wild ox, known as an aurochs. But this didn't stop the Christian church from becoming absolutely besotted with the idea of the unicorn from then on. To be fair, it's certainly more romantic than a giant cow. In medieval Christian Europe, the unicorn became a popular myth due to its virtuous traits. One legend recites how a unicorn can only be caught and tamed by a virgin. So if I was going to hunt one, I'd probably just lure it towards a Games Workshop store. Following this, there developed a trend where the unicorn was depicted as being hunted, as this idea had parallels to Christian ideals like the wrongful execution of Jesus. After all, both were pure and innocent and only pursuing virtue, yet were cruelly killed for their efforts by mankind. Leonardo da Vinci himself once wrote, "The unicorn, through its intemperance and not knowing how to control itself, for the love it bears to fair maidens, forgets its ferocity and wildness. Laying aside all fear, it will go up to a seated damsel and go to sleep in her lap, and thus hunters take it." In some sources, the unicorn was also believed to be the arch-nemesis of the lion. That's why, in the 12th century, shortly after England proclaimed their national animal to be the lion, Scotland decided theirs would be the unicorn. Absolutely fucking hilarious. It's that kind of cultural pettiness that truly makes me proud to be Scottish. Believe it or not though, even throughout all of this, the unicorn was still popularly believed to be a real creature. In fact, con artists were well established as being able to scam people out of money by selling them cups supposedly made from alicorn, claiming that drinking from it would protect them against poison. However, these utensils were actually just made from the horns of rhinos or narwhals, so any lord that did consume poison out of one probably didn't get his money back. But you gotta respect the hustle. Well, belief in the reality of the unicorn remained so strong that while renowned explorer Marco Polo was in Asia, he supposedly sought one out and was decidedly unimpressed. He described them as scarcely smaller than elephants, with the hair of a buffalo and feet like an elephant's. They have a single large black horn in the middle of the forehead and a head like a wild boar's, and spend their time, by preference, wallowing in mud and slime. They are very ugly brutes to look at, not at all such as we describe them when we relate that they let themselves be captured by virgins, but clean contrary to our notions. In the article where I found this quote, it simply ends with the statement, "It was clear he was describing a rhinoceros," which I thought was very funny. Now, the story does take a somber turn. During the 16th century, at the Council of Trent, the Catholic Church condemned the depiction of the unicorn in religious artwork, and unfortunately the animal's presence slowly began to disappear. By the 18th century, efforts into exploration had also finally proven that it was definitively not a real animal, taking away even more of its allure. It wasn't until the Victorian era, when tapestries of the unicorn were rediscovered, that they began to become culturally relevant again, and from then on, their popularity only continued to increase, up until the modern day. But how did the unicorn go from being something hailed by art lovers to a staple of the fantasy genre? Well, in arguably one of the most influential pieces of media that shaped its depiction in fantasy was The Last Unicorn. Originally a book written by Peter S. Beagle in 1968, the story later had a popular animated film adaptation in 1982. In this tale, unicorns are depicted as being the protectors of the forests they inhabit, using their innate magical powers to keep the creatures within safe from danger. The unicorn that the narrative follows is both powerful and pure of heart, using her magic to free captured animals and revive fallen heroes. All of these are aspects of the unicorn that have endured in fantasy to this day. Well, as research for this episode, I watched the animated film for the first time, and while it's a little strange at moments, I can say it still looks visually beautiful and that the story utilises myths and legends in very cool ways. I will say, however, that I despise Schmendrick, the incompetent magician, and he has become one of my least favourite characters in all of fantasy. When he's not being useless, he's getting captured by bandits, or helping poachers run circuses that revolve around animal cruelty, or just transforming people against their will and ruining their lives. Fuck off, Schmendrick. Anyway, that brings us up to 1974, and the first edition of Dungeons & Dragons, which showcased the unicorn as a monster and has included it in every edition since. In the game, the unicorn is said to dwell in enchanted forests. They are notably not horses but celestials conjured by gods, who are tasked with warding away evil and protecting sacred places. As such, they can be valuable allies, but only to those who are good-hearted. In first edition, unicorns are protected against poison, can't be snuck up on, and have the ability to teleport. These abilities remain largely consistent up to 5th edition, although by this point the unicorn has also gained protection against magic and the ability to cast potent healing, both on itself and others. It can also speak, as well as communicate telepathically. Now, while a lot of these ideas do align to the historical and mythological consensus of the unicorn, D&D's interpretation does go pretty off the rails with some of its abilities. Nowhere near as much as it does for other creatures, mind you, the Tarrasque. However, like usual, I preferred the creature when it was less supernatural. Call me crazy, but I don't think unicorns need to be able to do things like teleport to be cool. In my opinion, the unicorn is superior when it is far more grounded in reality, which after all is how the legend began, a description of a real animal like a horse or a rhino that became gradually warped over time. It also makes the notion of hunting one not a legendary feat, but a cruel and heartless pursuit to kill something vulnerable and innocent. In other words, the entire reason it was a popular myth for Christians to begin with. So, how would I write about the unicorn? Well, I would continue to portray it as a furtive creature of the forest who protects the woodlands it inhabits, although I would have this protection be a lot more subtle. Instead of casting spells or magically disappearing, I would have the unicorn's hidden nature be much less obvious, as if it is able to subconsciously trick your brain into not noticing things you normally would, or silently warn woodland creatures of incoming danger. It would otherwise be a largely regular animal, incapable of speech or telepathy, and its healing properties would not come from magic, but from the material of its horn. To gain any restorative abilities from the horn, you would have to first harvest it. But you wouldn't be so cruel as to do a thing like that, would you? Alright, that's going to be it for the unicorn. Thanks very much for listening, and thank you again to everyone who supported the launch of the podcast. It really means a lot to me. Also, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It's only a little thing, but it makes a huge difference to the success of the podcast. Okay, take care.